Good day guys, my name is Ben and welcome to my channel. I haven't posted a video in a while, but I thought when I got my GPi case I'd do a quick video. Now there are tons of videos on this, how to set up and everything, so I'm not going to go through that. I'm just going to go through my thoughts on how it performs, what can you expect out of Raspberry Pi Zero or Zero W, and what sort of emulators you can play safely, and just a quick comparison between RetroPie and Recalbox. So without further ado, let's get started. It comes in a rather retro looking box. A DC power cable is included, so you can plug your external battery pack with a USB, and you can power this device for a longer time period than the three AAA batteries that you can usually power through. Also comes with a cartridge slot. Doesn't look like the original Game Boy cartridge, but it's a nice little touch where your Raspberry Pi Zero goes in. I have set up the device with a preloaded image from Retroflag. So let's get started. It takes about probably 35 seconds to boot up. The screen on here is really nice, a 3.5-inch IPS display with a 4:3 aspect ratio, which is really good. Very low resolution as well, so which is really nice for old school games. I'm not sure whether the mic is picking up or not, but there is a slight hum. And in the past, when I created my own Game Boys out of Raspberry Pi Zeros, getting the sound out of the GPIO pins always have that slight hum to it. So that's kind of given in this instance. You can reduce the volume to get rid of it somewhat, but you cannot completely get rid of it. Okay, so in the Nostalgia image RetroPie, we have Atari 2600, Atari 7800 links, Nintendo Disk System, Game Gear, Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color, Sega Master System, Sega Mega Drive, Neogeo, NES. I've added Neogeo Pocket and Neogeo Pocket Color, PC Engine. I've also added 32X and Sega CD. SC1000 was already on the image itself. Super Nintendo. I trialed a lot of games and emulators on here, and you're basically going to get limited by what Raspberry Pi Zero can play or cannot play. So Atari 2600 is not going to be a problem. I haven't had any issues with Atari links either. Game Gear games works perfectly, and I'm just going to quickly start up a quick game of Aladdin. It takes slightly longer than Raspberry Pi 3 to get started on the gameplay, but it's not too bad, I think. The D-pad and the controls are really responsive. Start select button all works really well, just like what you expect. I haven't noticed any input lag at all as far as the emulation goes. In my test, Game Gear works really well. Let's try a quick game on Game Boy. In my test, Game Boy also works really well. one thing that is missing in Restalgia's 32 gig ROM is there are no arcade games set up for it. Arcade games are a little bit pain to set up because there's so many different boards and so many different varieties, so it's very hard to set up the controls. Maybe that's why. Also, your save and load works good as well. So if I go, hopefully there's no state. There's no save state, so I can't load it. But let's say if I save it, save state, and go here. And load state, and I'm back there. So yep, save states works perfectly well, no problems at all. Game Boy games works really well. Inputs are really great as well. The display looks great. Let's get out of it. Game Boy Advance, it runs most of the Game Boy Advance games really well, but every now and then you will come across a few games that do not work as well as you would like. I haven't noticed any input lag or audio lag on Game Boy Advance so far in my tests. So that works really well too. Game Boy Color should work really well. Haven't noticed anything odd with Sega Master System. Again, okay, Sega Mega Drive is not an issue. Neogeo doesn't work really well on the default emulator, so I had to use PIFBar, and the only downside with PIFBar is that you can't save stat. So if you're in the middle of a really long game session and you want to get out of it, you can't really do that. But otherwise, Neogeo works really well on PIFBar. It's just unfortunate that it doesn't work really well on the default emulator. Just gonna give a quick test. Yep, so Neogeo works really well. Nintendo should work really well as well. Let's try Adventure Island. Again, so just to pause the game here really quickly, the buttons on this are really well, they feel just like the original, and they're really responsive as well. There's no input lag. The D-pad is really good as well. One thing I have noticed that Neo Geo Pocket and Neo Geo Pocket Color doesn't work really well with a Raspberry Pi Zero. There's only one default emulator and that doesn't work well at all. So as you can see, the crackling here, and this is barely running at a 10 or 15 FPS. And same goes with the Neo Geo Pocket as well. Sorry, Pocket Color as well. See the crackling, hear the crackling sound, and that's pretty much it for the Neo Geo Pocket Color. PC Engine games, I have noticed working really well, no issues at all. The Adventure Island game, for some reason, in here is the same as the Wonder Boy game on the Master System, I think. With a better music though. Sega 32X doesn't work well, so no matter what emulators I've tried, it's really sluggish. To me, this is unplayable. Gonna move on to Sega CD. Doesn't work for me. I haven't set it properly, but I believe it will have the same level of lags like the Sega 32X. SU1000 works really well, no problems. There shouldn't be. Super Nintendo works for the most part really well as well, so I haven't noticed any lags or anything like that, which is good. If I just go and try one of my games that I've set it into favorites rather than scrolling through thousands of games. This is Super International Cricket for Super Nintendo. Not a very demanding game, but you get the idea. It works okay. So Super Nintendo highlights one of the flaws with this machine. There are two shoulder buttons on the back, left and right, and they are really hard to get to. It's not really ergonomic at all, and it's really funky how you press those buttons and try to operate this. So my thumb is really cramped trying to operate the D-pad while I have still pressed the back buttons. So just a minor sort of downside to this. I'm gonna save state and get out of here. So yep, Super Nintendo works really well. So one thing to note is that this cartridge does not have any heat vents anyway. So in this little bit of playing with the GPi case, I have noticed that the back of the cartridge has been heated up a little bit. So with very demanding games and a lot of heat, it is really recommended that you actually stop playing and shut down the system for a while, let it cool down, and then start playing again. So when I played some of the heavy SNES games for more than a couple of hours, it got really hot, and it was really looked like thermal throttling as well, so I had to shut it down. The other thing I wanted to quickly touch base was I have a recall box image on here, another SD card. I thought with the recall box being a little bit more optimized, it would have a better performance on the Neogeo Portable and Sega 32X, but that's not the case. I haven't noticed any performance improvements at all. Oops. Again, recall box also boots up in about 30 to 40 seconds, a little bit quicker than the Retroflag. Neogeo performance was the same as the Retroflag. Neogeo Pocket is really the same. I was really hoping that Neogeo Pocket Color would have a better performance on here, but it's not. It's same leggy gameplay. See how it's dropping down to like 10 to 15 frames per second. So in my mind, it's unplayable. Everything else works really well. My personal preference is still to go with the Retroflag, but so 32X, again, the same performance as Retroflag. So no real performance improvement. So I would go for Retroflag because it offers a little bit more flexibility in terms of what I want to do. So again, you can see the slowdowns. This is really Raspberry Pi Zero rather than the software, because the software emulation works really well on the Raspberry Pi 3 and above. So just the power, limited power on the Raspberry Pi Zero. So again, correctly, not working really well. To me, it's unplayable. Let's quickly wrap up here. It's a great little machine. It's just going to be limited by what Raspberry Pi Raspberry Pi 0 or 0W can handle. So it really handles NES, SNES, Mega Drive, Sega Master System, Game Gear, Neogeo to some degree, PC Engine, Game Boy Advance, and Game Boy Color really well. Not so great is the Neogeo Portable. I would say unplayable. Sega 32X unplayable. Some of the heavy 3D based arcade games would be unplayable as well. I haven't tested PlayStation 1 games, but I think some of the PlayStation 1 games would work okay, but not the others. Again, the limitations of the Raspberry Pi Zero. Yeah, if you like this video, please hit the like button. Please consider subscribing if you like, and see you in the next video. Thank you.